Hello there and welcome back to the Sleep Science. Tonight you find yourself outside, somewhere between twilight and the edge of sleep, pressing your fingertips into the ground. The soil is cool, a little damp and crumbly against your skin. You roll a pinch between thumb and forefinger, and there's something strangely alive about it, as if each grain hums with secrets you're not quite cleared to hear yet. Soil is one of those things you step on every day without thought, but the moment you stop, lean down, and actually touch it, you realize it's not just dirt. It's the memory foam of the planet, except instead of remembering how your elbow dug into it last night, it remembers forests, fires, floods, footsteps, and even entire civilizations. And yes, here comes the cheeky reality check. You probably wouldn't survive if you were stranded without it, because no soil means no food, no water cycling, and probably no you. Comforting, right? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and your local time. I love seeing the little constellation of night owls and early risers who wander in here. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your fingertips linger in the soil and you notice the smell. It's that musky, grounding scent called petrichor. That aroma isn't just nostalgia. It's actually caused by actinobacteria releasing compounds when soil gets wet. That's the hidden memory of soil announcing itself, whispering, "I've been here a long time." Imagine the Roman legions marching across some field 2,000 years ago. Dust kicked up from their sandals could, in theory, still contain microbial descendants from that day. Mainstream historians agree the Romans were meticulous record keepers, but soil, it was recording too, without ever asking for papyrus. You kneel lower, noticing how the ground isn't one flat layer. It's textured, dimpled, patterned with roots and pebbles. You brush aside a bit of the surface and spot an earthworm sliding away, the subterranean librarian who spends its whole life mixing, turning, and reshuffling history. In medieval times, monks were convinced earthworms literally ate dirt to make fertile ground. Today you know better, but only slightly. They don't eat just dirt. They digest fragments of leaves, tiny minerals, and organic debris, passing it back out as richer soil. You can't help but grin. Nature's first recycling program is squishy, slimy, and wriggles away before you can thank it. What makes you chuckle is how soil holds on to things people never intended it to keep. A dropped coin, an apple core, an arrowhead. All of these slip beneath the surface and join the quiet archive. The strangest tidbit, some soils can even fossilize footprints. Archaeologists uncovered human tracks in New Mexico that may be over 20,000 years old, stamped in what was once a muddy lakeshore. Those footprints were only preserved because soil tucked them away like diary entries, sealed beneath layers of silt. Historians still argue whether those early footprints represent the absolute first Americans or just one branch of migrating groups. But what's not debated is that soil decided to keep them when everything else, the voices, the laughter, the campfire sparks, vanished. You lie back on the ground, cheek brushing the dirt, and feel the subtle warmth where the sun baked into it all afternoon. The soil itself radiates a soft heat, like it's breathing beneath you. That warmth reminds you of another kind of memory, the way soil acts like a thermal battery, storing the sun's energy by day and slowly releasing it at night. Farmers in ancient Mesopotamia didn't fully know the physics, but they observed it, planting seeds after sundown so the earth's residual warmth coaxed sprouts upward faster. It's the kind of old hack your grandparents might have sworn by, backed now by soil science instead of superstition. You let your eyes close for a moment and imagine each patch of ground beneath you as a time capsule. Somewhere, There are grains of sand that once tumbled in the belly of a glacier, flecks of volcanic ash from eruptions older than cities, and the faint imprint of a hoofprint from a goat that wandered by in the Bronze Age. You chuckle softly at the thought that soil might remember more about us than we do about ourselves. Your smartphone's memory may crash, but soil just keeps logging entries for millennia. No cloud subscription required. When you open your eyes again, a breeze stirs dust into the air. A single mote lands on your wrist, and suddenly you're thinking about how much of history is floating invisibly in every pinch of earth. Scientists once found spores of bacteria trapped in salt crystals nearly 250 million years old that could still, under the right conditions, come back to life. Talk about a stubborn memory. Imagine a brain that refused to forget its multiplication tables after 2.5 geological eras. You brush your wrist and smile, because really, touching soil is like shaking hands with every past moment the planet has chosen not to erase. Each crumb clings to your fingertips like it doesn't want to let go, as though it recognizes you as part of its ongoing story. The ground beneath you is alive with memory, and you realize you've only brushed the surface. You stay there on the ground, fingertips pressing deeper, until the dampness of the soil starts to cling under your nails. What you can't see with your eyes is the bustling city of microbes living just beneath your skin's reach. You imagine them like tiny archivists, scribbling away in invisible ink, each one encoding its own version of history. Soil holds more living organisms in a single handful than there are people on Earth. And that's just the microbes we've managed to name. There are countless others quietly running the underground economy. You breathe in and the faint, earthy aroma intensifies. That scent is microbial memory, a constant reminder that soil is never static. It changes, records, responds, and stores. You picture it like the planet's equivalent of a hard drive, except this hard drive wiggles, reproduces, and occasionally smells like wet socks. The mainstream historical note that tickles your mind is this. Ancient farmers in China and the Fertile Crescent were already unknowingly manipulating soil microbes thousands of years ago. By rotating crops and adding organic waste, they were nudging microscopic communities to work in their favor. They didn't know the words nitrogen fixation or mycorrhizal symbiosis, but they knew healthier soil meant healthier food. Fast forward to modern science, and we're still astonished at just how intelligent those invisible networks are. But here, the quirky side. Some researchers swear soil microbes can influence human moods. There's a bacterium called Mycobacterium vaccae that, when inhaled, has been shown to spark serotonin production in the brain. In other words, digging in the garden may literally cheer you up, not just because of the fresh tomatoes, but because the soil itself is passing along chemical whispers. Imagine microbes as tiny therapists, prescribing joy while crawling across your palm. That's a mental health plan with no copay, though admittedly, the waiting room smells a little muddy. Historians still argue whether early civilizations were aware of these invisible allies, or if they attributed soil's richness entirely to gods and spirits. Did farmers pray to fertility deities because they sensed something alive beneath the surface? Or was it purely ritual, with microbes secretly doing the heavy lifting while the humans sang their chants? The debate lingers, because no one can interview a Sumerian farmer about his microbial theology. You shift your hand and watch a small clump crumble away, imagining each fleck carrying records of rainfalls, droughts, and plagues. Microbes embed traces of ancient climates in their DNA, miniature historians documenting every era. Some scientists even analyze old microbial genes to reconstruct past temperatures and rainfall. It's like soil keeps backup files of the weather report, just in case future humans want to check. And then you stumble on one of the stranger ideas. soil as a kind of planetary memory palace. Some fringe theorists propose microbes may actually learn collectively, responding faster when challenges repeat, almost like the soil itself builds habits. It's controversial, debated, and not universally accepted, but you like the image. Billions of microbial librarians filing away experiences, ready to adjust the next time the planet throws them a curveball. You smile, imagining dirt with a study group. The sound of a cricket rises from nearby, and you think about how microbial life supports every layer above it. The cricket's body is nourished by plants that, in turn, only thrive thanks to microscopic soil life. In a roundabout way, even the chirping you hear now is an echo of microbial whispers. Without them, silence would fall over fields and forests alike. You recall another historical nugget. In the 19th century, scientists like Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch revolutionized medicine by proving microbes cause disease. What fewer people talk about is how those same discoveries reframed agriculture. Suddenly, soil wasn't inert dirt, but a living matrix. The field that once just looked like mud became a laboratory of tiny lives. The funny twist. While Pasteur warned us about germs on our hands, gardeners later discovered some of those very soil bacteria actually protect us, boosting immunity like microscopic bouncers at the door of your nose. You trace circles in the dirt with your finger and the texture shifts. Gritty sand here, sticky clay there, fluffy loam in between. Each texture is a different microbial neighborhood with its own cast of residents. Sandy soils are like spacious suburbs, quick draining and light. Clay is more like a crowded city, holding tightly to water and nutrients. Loam, the gardener's gold, is the balanced small town where everyone seems to get along. And yet, even in these cozy microbial suburbs, not everything is peaceful. Viruses that infect bacteria, called bacteriophages, are constantly at war beneath your fingertips, rewriting genetic codes and shifting microbial memories. The soil you're touching is a battlefield, though the soldiers are so small you'd need a microscope the size of your face to even notice. The funny thing is, while humans write epics about their wars, soil just shrugs and keeps the microbial chronicles running. You lean back, dusting your palms, and feel a quiet appreciation for the life you can't see. There's something almost intimate about knowing your skin has just brushed against ancient record keepers, each one storing a fraction of history. Soil doesn't brag about its archives. It just keeps them, patiently, in case you ever decide to look closer. And as you breathe in once more, you can't help but laugh softly to yourself. Who knew dirt could be so chatty? You stay stretched out on the earth a little longer, running your fingers through the top layer like a lazy rake. What you notice is the way each scoop seems slightly different, darker, lighter, softer, denser, as if the soil beneath you is stacked in sheets. It's like flipping through an old family photo album, except instead of awkward haircuts and bad lighting, these pages are made of sand, silt, clay, and fragments of once living things. Soil layers, what scientists call horizons, are where the planet keeps its diary. The uppermost part, the one you're smudging across your palm right now, is called the O horizon. O for organic, which is just a polite way of saying it's packed with decomposing leaves, dead insects, and that apple core you forgot to toss in the compost bin. Beneath that sits the horizon, the so-called topsoil. Farmers love it, gardeners obsess over it, and civilizations have risen and fallen based on how much of it they could hold on to. Here's your mainstream historical fact of the evening. The Dust Bowl of the 1930s wasn't caused by a sudden drought alone. It was also the brutal consequence of people overplowing the horizon, stripping it of its resilience. When the winds came, the soil had no memory left to cling to, and entire towns were swallowed in clouds of dust. If ever there was proof that soil remembers abuse, it's those dark storms rolling over Kansas. You dig a little deeper with your hand and the soil changes color, less crumbly, more compact. That's the B horizon, the subsoil. This is the storage vault of minerals washed down from above. Iron, clay, aluminum, all leaching through over centuries. It's like the attic nobody visits, where heirlooms collect dust until someone finally bothers to climb the ladder. Funny thing is, plants do like it much. It's dense and stingy with nutrients. Yet without it, the whole soil profile would collapse like a badly baked cake. Beneath that lies the sea horizon, made of weathered rock fragments, the leftovers of ancient bedrock crumbling slowly. You tap a small pebble with your fingernail and realize you're touching a piece of stone that could be hundreds of thousands of years old. Below even that sits the bedrock, the R horizon, silent and unyielding. Bedrock is the old man at the bottom of the family tree, grumpy, unmoved, but foundational. The quirky tidbit here. Some geologists claim soil horizons form so predictably that you can use them to tell time almost like a clock. In Hawaii, for instance, certain horizons take thousands of years to develop, layer by layer, like slow-motion sedimentary birthday candles. It's a kind of memory not written in words but in patience. You almost want to whisper, "Happy 10,000th birthday, dirt." Historians still argue whether ancient cultures recognized these layers consciously. Did they notice that digging deeper gave them different textures and colors, or did they just chalk it up to chance? There are Egyptian tomb paintings that show farmers plowing the dark, fertile silt left by the Nile's floods each year. Was that an early awareness of soil horizons, or simply a lucky river deposit? Scholars debate it, and soil remains tight-lipped, keeping its diary closed. You sit up and look at the small pit you've created. It's hardly a geological excavation, but even this shallow scratch reveals the Earth's tendency to archive in layers. You think of libraries with their stacks of floors, fiction on one level, reference on another, archives locked away in the basement. Soil does the same, except it files by time rather than Dewey Decimal. The cool part, scientists can read these horizons like detective novels. A layer stained black with charcoal might tell of an ancient wildfire. A band rich with clay might whisper of a long-ago floodplain. Sometimes there's even a thin strip of volcanic ash, a calling card from an eruption thousands of miles away. Soil doesn't just remember what happened here. It remembers what blew in from far away, carried by winds and storms. As you trace the horizon lines, you can't help imagining soil as a layered cake. The O horizon is frosting, sweet, messy, and constantly replenished. The horizon is the sponge, soft, delicious, and the main reason you eat cake in the first place. The B horizon is like the dense middle layer your aunt swears was intentional but everyone knows is slightly overcooked. And the C horizon, that's the crunchy bottom crust you either love or politely leave behind. You laugh quietly at your own analogy, nature as the original baker, layering time instead of flour. A memory surfaces. Archaeologists once uncovered distinct black bands of soil in the Amazon, called terra preta, or dark earth. This wasn't just natural layering. It was engineered centuries ago by indigenous peoples mixing charcoal, bone, and food waste into the ground. The result? Soil that still, to this day, produces crops more abundantly than the surrounding land. It's proof that humans figured out how to write directly into the soil's diary, leaving a note that future generations can still read. You glance at the shallow pit again, imagining someone 1,000 years from now digging here. What will they see in the layers? A thin line of plastic fragments, maybe, or a smear of concrete dust. Perhaps a horizon stained with strange chemicals that scream 21st century. Soil will keep those entries, whether flattering or not. And when the archaeologists of the future squint at their samples, they'll be piecing together a story you're still living. For now, though, you simply press your palm flat against the ground again. The layers are hidden, but you know they're there, stacked like whispered chapters, waiting for anyone who cares enough to listen. Soil is patient, always patient, holding the weight of memory in quiet horizons beneath your restless feet. Your fingers brush along the soil again, and this time you notice something darker mixed into the grains. Tiny black flecks that look like coffee grounds but smell faintly smoky. These are the scars of fire, preserved in charcoal fragments that refuse to vanish. Soil remembers flames with surprising stubbornness. Where wood and brush once burned, the ground keeps a permanent record, like smudged ink in its diary. You pick up one of those charcoal crumbs, roll it between your fingers, and realize it's light as ash yet ancient as stone. Fires have always been part of human history, sometimes accidental, sometimes intentional. Mainstream historians remind us that early humans learned to control fire nearly 1 million years ago, using it not just for warmth but for cooking and landscape management. Those blazes left behind charred remains, many of which slipped into soil and never left. In a way, the earth beneath you is full of campfire leftovers that never fully cooled. The quirky tidbit here: archaeologists once discovered fire pits in South Africa dating back nearly 200,000 years, where the soil still contained microscopic charcoal, proof that people were not only burning wood, but experimenting with cooking roots and tubers. Imagine some Paleolithic chef nervously tossing a yam into the embers, inventing dinner while unknowingly writing, "We had takeout here," in the soil's eternal notebook. Historians still argue whether ancient controlled burns were sophisticated farming techniques or simply accidents that got out of hand. Did early groups intentionally torch landscapes to attract game and enrich soil? Or were they just careless with sparks, later claiming, No, we meant to do that"? The soil can't clear up the debate, but it does preserve the evidence, in black and gray flecks beneath your hand. You stretch out on your side, watching a breeze scatter dry leaves across the ground, and think about how fire reshapes everything. Forests burn, grasslands ignite, even peat bogs can smolder underground for years. Yet soil doesn't treat fire as destruction alone. It records it, locks it away, and often uses it as fuel for fertility. That paradoxical role explains why indigenous communities from Australia to the Americas practice deliberate burns. The earth remembers the flames, then rewards the next cycle of growth. There's something almost magical about how soil preserves the chemical fingerprints of ancient fires. Black carbon, for instance, can last thousands of years underground, slowly binding nutrients and making land more fertile. Some scientists call this biochar, and farmers today are rediscovering it as a way to enrich soil while storing carbon. Funny how modern innovation sometimes looks suspiciously like remembering an old trick. You recall another scene from history. When Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 CE, it blanketed Pompeii and Herculaneum in volcanic ash. Beneath that ash, layers of soil still contain charcoal traces from the eruption's fires. It's eerie. Soil keeps a backup copy of disasters, even when human records vanish. That ash, turned into fertile ground over centuries, is still part of vineyards and orchards today. So yes, the next time you sip Italian wine, you might be tasting grapes nourished by the soil memory of Pompeii's fiery end. You smile at the thought, though it's a little unsettling. Soil, it seems, has no sense of too soon. You dig a little deeper, brushing away clumps of earth, and notice how roots weave around the flecks of charcoal. Plants, too, remember fire through the soil. Some species only germinate after flames have passed, their seeds chemically triggered by the smoke and ash. In that sense, fire doesn't just leave a scar, it leaves a password, an unlocked code buried in the ground. Soil acts as the safe, holding that code until the right conditions coax new life forward. And then your imagination runs away. What if soil were whispering stories of fire to the plants growing above it? A tree rooted here might unknowingly tap into the memory of a blaze that raged centuries ago. Perhaps the acorn it drops next year carries a subtle imprint of survival, a reminder to grow stronger against the possibility of future flames. The sun dips lower, shadows lengthening, and you think about how humans have always been both fascinated and terrified by fire. In medieval Europe, ashes from burned wood were sometimes sprinkled into fields as fertilizer, a kind of early biochar practice. People didn't know the chemistry, but they sensed that fire left behind something the soil valued. In a sense, they were reading the soil's memory without being able to translate it fully. You brush your fingertips across the black flecks again, and they stain your skin slightly. A strange thought surfaces. The carbon in that smudge may have come from a tree that lived centuries ago, burned, and became part of this ground. Now it's smudged onto you, linking your body into the same cycle. You're not just touching soil, you're borrowing its fire-laced memory for a moment. It's both humbling and oddly comforting. Soil doesn't mourn the flames, it integrates them, folds them into its layers, and carries on. You take a breath, your lungs filling with cool evening air, and let the smoky scent linger a little longer in your mind. Fire leaves scars, but in soil, scars are simply another form of story. You lean closer to the soil again, noticing how the dark flecks of charcoal gradually give way to something else. Small, pale ovals tucked quietly beneath the surface. Seeds. Some cracked, some shriveled, but some startlingly intact. You pluck one out and hold it between your fingers, marveling at its smooth surface, a tiny capsule of potential, waiting with the patience of centuries. Seeds are the earth's stubborn archivists. While most sprout or decay quickly, a select few refuse to be rushed. They bide their time, lying dormant in soil like secret notes, ready to awaken only when conditions are right. Soil, it turns out, isn't just memory, it's storage. Mainstream history offers a famous example. In 2005, scientists successfully germinated a 2,000-year-old date palm seed discovered at Masada, an ancient fortress in Israel. The plant was nicknamed Methuselah, and it grew tall and proud, proof that seeds can wait through centuries, then casually shrug and say, "All right, let's photosynthesize." That one act made headlines because it showed that soil isn't just a grave, it's a vault. The quirky tidbit that makes you grin. In Siberia, researchers coaxed life out of seeds buried in permafrost for about 32,000 years. These seeds weren't just old, they were prehistoric, frozen away while mammoths still trudged across tundra. And yet, under a little coaxing in a modern lab, they sprouted as if they'd only taken a long nap. Imagine waking up from a 30 millennia snooze to find yourself in a greenhouse under fluorescent lights. Talk about jet lag. Historians still argue whether ancient peoples intentionally buried seeds for safekeeping, or whether soil just happened to do the work on their behalf. Archaeological digs sometimes reveal granaries, burned or collapsed, where seeds fell into the dirt, unintentionally creating a time capsule. Were those caches deliberate insurance policies for hard years ahead, or accidents of disaster that, by chance, gave us the chance to peek into ancient agriculture? The soil isn't telling, it simply cradled them, patient as ever. You shift the little seed between your fingers and imagine its ancestors. Maybe it once belonged to a field tended by Bronze Age hands, planted in furrows now long gone. Maybe its cousins fed children who ran barefoot across these same soils. Every seed is a message from the past, though written in genetic code instead of ink. Soil's seed memory isn't just about preservation, it's about timing. Certain seeds are designed to wait. They carry chemical locks that only fire, flood, or frost can break. The soil acts as their security system, holding them in stasis until the password arrives. It's both practical and poetic. The ground beneath you holds not only the story of what was, but the possibility of what might be again. You can't help but laugh at the thought of soil as a forgetful gardener. Oh, right, I've been holding on to this little guy for 500 years. Here you go. Then suddenly, a sprig of green pushes through, claiming its overdue place in the sunlight. Another example flits across your mind. In North America, seeds of the sacred lotus have been known to sprout after lying dormant for over a millennium. That plant blooms with serene pink flowers, completely unaware that the soil has been keeping its nap schedule longer than most civilizations have lasted. You run your palm across the ground, feeling the bumps and ridges, and wonder how many seeds lie beneath you right now, hidden but alive, waiting for the right hint of rain or warmth. Each one is a possibility tucked into the Earth's pocket, proof that memory here isn't just about the past, it's also a rehearsal for the future. Soil doesn't simply store fossils of what once was, it actively rehearses tomorrow by holding seeds in reserve. It's like the planet has its own emergency drawer labeled, "In case of ecological collapse, break glass." And when humans mess things up, as we so often do, soil quietly offers us second chances in the form of forgotten sprouts. As twilight deepens, you tuck the seed back into the ground where you found it. You press a little soil over the top, almost like returning a library book. The earth has been patient with it this long. You don't want to interrupt its quiet schedule. You smile at the thought that one day, perhaps long after you're gone, that seed may split open and stretch toward the sun. Soil doesn't rush, it just waits. And as you rest your hand flat against the earth again, you realize you're not just lying on memory. You're lying on possibilities, thousands of tiny promises curled up in silence, waiting for their cue. You shift onto your knees, brushing soil from your hands, when something sharp edges against your fingertip. At first you think it's just a stone, but as you pull it free, you see the worn curve of pottery, a shard of clay vessel that once held water or grain. The soil around you is not just filled with seeds and charcoal, it's crowded with bones, broken tools, and fragments of lives that came before yours. The ground is a museum without a curator, a storage room of history where nothing ever gets fully filed away. You turn the shard over in your hand, noticing how smooth one side feels, as if it once pressed against someone's palm. A potter, centuries ago, shaped it with care, and now it rests here, camouflaged in the dirt until your clumsy fingers rediscovered it. Historians love these kinds of finds. Mainstream accounts remind us that archaeology as a discipline grew from this very instinct, people realizing that soil itself is the archive. Every scoop of dirt, a chance to bump into another clue about vanished civilizations. The quirky tidbit. In Denmark, farmers sometimes stumble across bog bodies, humans buried in peat, preserved so well that their skin and even stomach contents remain visible after thousands of years. The soil, saturated with tannins and acids, acts like a bizarre natural pickle jar, refusing to let the body decay. Imagine being so well remembered by dirt that someone in the distant future knows exactly what you had for breakfast 2,000 years ago. That's dedication. Historians still argue whether these bog bodies were willing sacrifices, unlucky criminals, or simply unfortunate travelers who wandered into the wrong swamp. The soil offers no confession, only the stubborn memory of preservation. As you rest the pottery shard down, you picture how countless other fragments lie hidden just beneath the surface. Arrowheads, beads, coins, buttons, the tiny detritus of human living. Soil gathers them all, mixing them with bones of animals, roots, and stones, until the past and present become indistinguishable. It's humbling to realize that every step you take might press against some forgotten artifact. You brush more soil away and find a bone, small, pale, and delicate. You hesitate, unsure if it belonged to a bird a rabbit, or perhaps something human. The line between artifact and relic is thin, and the earth doesn't label its shelves. You lay it back gently, acknowledging that soil often holds what we are not ready to fully confront. In one sense, the ground beneath you is crowded with ghosts, though not in the spooky, rattling chains way. More in the sense that soil refuses to let the story end. Even when flesh rots and wood decays, soil clings to fragments. Enamel from a tooth, the curve of a jaw, the imprint of a textile long dissolved. It doesn't erase, it edits. Your thoughts wander to Pompeii again, where volcanic soil entombed entire households. Archaeologists discovered voids in the hardened ash where bodies had decomposed, spaces the soil still held like memory foam impressions. By filling those voids with plaster, they revealed shapes of people frozen mid-motion, proof that soil had quietly kept their outline for nearly 2 millennia. The dirt never forgets, even when we'd rather it did. You can't resist a bit of gallows humor. If soil had a lost and found desk, it would be the most overstocked counter in existence. Lost, 1 Roman sandal. Found, 30 skeletons, a jar of honey still edible, and your neighbor's entire collapsed house. You hate to be the clerk trying to organize that list. And yet, despite its chaotic filing system, soil is surprisingly generous. It offers up relics when the time feels right. A farmer's plow might hit an ancient coin. A construction site might unearth a forgotten graveyard. Every time, the soil gently says, "Here, I've been keeping this safe for you." Sometimes the message is tragic, sometimes miraculous, but it is always a reminder that memory is not only in books, it's under our shoes. You sit back and run your hand through the dirt, this time imagining it as a palimpsest, a manuscript written and rewritten over centuries. Every bone, every shard, every fragment is a line of text, overlapping with the next. Some words are clear, others smudged, but the overall story hums with continuity. The shard of pottery glints again in the fading light, and you tuck it back into the soil where you found it. It feels wrong to pocket it, as if you'd be stealing from the ground's private journal. Soil may not mind, but you sense it prefers to keep its memories intact. You pat the dirt gently, a small thank you for the glimpse it offered. As you lean back, you realize that walking across any field, any forest, any street means moving across a cemetery of stories, bones, shards, broken tools, every one of them folded patiently into the ground. Soil doesn't judge whether they were treasures or trash. It just keeps them, layering memory upon memory, a quiet curator for eternity. You brush the soil from your palms, but some of it clings stubbornly, smudging the lines of your skin. When you lift your hand closer to your face, you notice tiny specks caught in the light, grains of pollen. They're barely visible, little yellowish flecks, yet they're some of the most precise storytellers the soil has to offer. Pollen is the planet's time-stamped confetti. Each grain has a unique shape, like a microscopic fingerprint specific to the plant that produced it. When pollen drifts into the soil, it doesn't always dissolve away. Instead, it gets tucked into layers, sealed in sediment, preserved for thousands, sometimes millions of years. Soil becomes a scrapbook, each page dusted with ancient floral postcards. The mainstream historical fact: scientists used fossilized pollen to reconstruct the Ice Age landscapes of Europe. By analyzing soil cores drilled deep into lake beds, they could tell when forests expanded, when grasslands stretched out, and when climates shifted. That's how researchers pieced together the migration patterns of animals like mammoths, and eventually, the humans who followed them. The soil was quietly keeping a botanical diary, and modern science finally learned how to read it. The quirky tidbit you can't help grinning at: in some forensic cases, detectives use pollen grains in soil as crime scene evidence. Since pollen types vary by location and season, A single speck clinging to a shoe or a carpet fiber can reveal where someone has been. Imagine soil testifying in court. Yes, Your Honor, the suspect definitely walked through a field of ragweed last Tuesday. Nature's tiniest witnesses, sworn in without raising a hand. Historians still argue whether ancient peoples recognized pollen's persistence. They may not have had microscopes, but did they notice that flowers blooming or vanishing marked deeper cycles in the soil? Some argue that ancient agricultural calendars were indirectly tuned to pollen flows, while others insist farmers worked by simple observation of visible plants. The debate continues, and soil keeps holding its pollen cards close to the chest. You dig lightly into the dirt with your fingertips, imagining the grains you can't see, the ghosts of vanished forests and meadows, all trapped down there. Somewhere beneath your hand, there could be pollen from a pine tree that shaded Neolithic hunters, or from grasses that once brushed against the ankles of migrating herds. Each grain is absurdly durable, as if nature wanted to make sure flowers never go unremembered. There's something poetic about pollen being both fleeting and eternal. You sneeze at it in spring, curse it for allergies, and yet the soil treats each grain like a precious keepsake, pressing it into the book of time. If you've ever wondered what ancient air smelled like, pollen is the closest thing to a record. Your mind drifts to another curious case, peat bogs in northern Europe. Scientists sliced cores from those bogs and found layers packed with pollen, revealing when people first cleared forests for farming. At one level, dense tree pollen dominates, oak, birch, hazel. Then suddenly the pollen record shifts to grasses and grains. That's the soil whispering, here, when humans arrived with their plows and their sheep. The transformation was literally written in dust. You chuckle, imagining soil as the nosy neighbor peering over the fence. Oh, I saw when they cut down that oak grove. I wrote it down. Don't worry, I keep receipts. The more you think about it, the more pollen feels like soil's secret handwriting, tiny characters only decipherable with a microscope. Each grain shaped uniquely, some spiky like medieval maces, some smooth like marbles, some ridged like tiny brain coral. Whole atlases exist just to catalog their shapes, as if scientists are building dictionaries to translate soil's floral language. You close your eyes and imagine inhaling air from 10,000 years ago, air thick with the pollen of wildflowers that no longer exist, drifting over landscapes that look nothing like today's. Soil still has those records, sealed away. The ground beneath you is, in a way, the planet's best historian, remembering plants that have long since vanished. When you open your eyes again, you rub a bit more soil between your fingers. The pollen is invisible now, but you know it's there, tucked in like a whisper. Soil doesn't brag about its pollen archives, but without them, you'd never know what forests once stretched where now there are deserts, or what fields of flowers bloomed where now there are highways. A quiet thought surfaces. Maybe soil is less like a library and more like a diary written in code, grains of pollen as syllables, each one carrying a trace of time. You can't help but smirk, because you realize you've just spent a whole evening talking about dirt like it's a poet. But then again, dirt is the most patient poet you'll ever meet. You brush your palms clean again, though the faint grit lingers no matter how much you rub. This time, instead of seeds or pollen, you notice something brittle glinting faintly white against the darker soil. At first it looks like salt from a spilled shaker, scattered crystals half buried in the dirt. And in a way, that's exactly what it is, soil remembering drought. Salt is one of the clearest signatures the ground can keep. When water evaporates under hot, dry skies, minerals rise and crust the surface. Centuries later, those salty traces still mark the soil like scars. Beneath your knees, the ground may be whispering about ancient summers of thirst, when rivers shrank and crops withered, long before anyone bothered to write down the year. The mainstream historical fact that surfaces is the fate of Mesopotamia. Around 4,000 years ago, irrigation practices gradually salted the soil. As water was pulled through canals, it left behind more and more minerals. Eventually, fertile fields turned white and barren, forcing people to abandon once thriving farmland. Some historians even link this soil salinization to the decline of Sumerian power. The earth had kept a record, and it wasn't flattering. The quirky tidbit. In Bolivia's Salar de Uyuni, the world's largest salt flat, their soil so loaded with sodium that it gleams like a mirror after rain. It's beautiful, breathtaking, and wildly impractical if you wanted to grow tomatoes. Yet this salty soil is so vast that satellites use it to calibrate their sensors. Imagine soil crust acting as Earth's selfie filter, helping us check our cameras in space. Historians still argue whether salt-crusted ruins in the Middle East represent true drought collapse or a combination of human mismanagement and natural cycles. Was it careless irrigation, or was the climate shifting on its own? Soil remembers the salt either way, but it won't assign blame. It just holds the evidence in its crystals, waiting for someone to notice. You scrape at one of the crystals with your fingernail and it flakes away, crumbling easily. The taste of salt lingers faintly on the air, though you resist the urge to put any in your mouth. The soil here is whispering about thirsty times, times when water vanished and life clung desperately to whatever moisture it could find. And here's the thing. Soil isn't just passive in these moments. Drought alters its entire chemistry. Microbes go dormant, organic matter shrinks, cracks open like lips parched in the sun. The ground physically remembers the stress. Even centuries later, the pattern of cracks and the layers of salt are still visible, a geological sigh etched across the Earth's skin. You think of other droughts carried in soil memory. In California, tree ring studies link to soil evidence of megadroughts lasting decades, far worse than anything seen in recent memory. Soil holds those records in mineral deposits, in dust layers swept across valleys, in the faint outlines of desiccated marshlands. When modern scientists dig cores and test for salts and isotopes, they're simply checking the receipts the soil filed away. The irony is almost funny. Humans keep misplacing their records, lost scrolls, burned libraries, corrupted hard drives, while dirt just shrugs and keeps storing everything in plain sight. Soil doesn't bother with ink or stone tablets. It lets crystals and cracks do the talking. You run your hand across the ground again and notice how some areas feel tight and hardened, almost like ceramic. That's another drought memory. Soil baking under relentless sun until it compacts, sealing itself like pottery. Farmers even today dread this hardpan, the stubborn crust that blocks water when rain finally returns. Soil remembers not only being thirsty, but also being reluctant to forgive. The fatting light plays across the crusty surface, and you imagine walking barefoot here centuries ago. Your heel pressing into the salty ground, your tongue dry, the horizon wavering with heat. Every footstep a complaint, every shadow a prayer for rain. And if those prayers were unanswered, the soil locked away the evidence. Salt for sorrow, cracks for silence. Yet even in these harsh memories, soil hides resilience. Some plants adapt to salty, drought-scarred soils, halophytes, with names as strange as their habits. Glasswort, sea lavender, saltbush. They thrive where others would shrivel. Their roots drink cautiously. Their leaves excrete excess salt like tiny built-in desalination plants. Soil holds those adaptations too, as if to say, see, life finds a way even when I'm parched. You sit back, brushing the salty crystals off your hands, and smile at the odd paradox. Soil, the same medium that can cradle ancient seeds for rebirth, can also salt itself into sterility. It's both cradle and crypt, a patient keeper of drought's cruel memory. And as the first stars prick the sky above you, you realize that every pinch of soil is a lesson, sometimes about abundance, sometimes about loss. Tonight it happens to be about thirst, the kind so deep even the ground remembers. You lean back, shaking the salty dust from your fingers, and your eyes fall on a darker, richer patch of ground just beyond the crust. It smells different, sweeter somehow, with a faint tang of rot. This is compost at work, decay turned into memory fuel. Where salt speaks of drought, compost is soil's love letter to renewal. You scoop up a handful and it crumbles easily, lighter than the brittle earth you touched before. It's filled with tiny threads, fragments of leaves, maybe even the ghost of last season's apple core. You can almost feel the energy humming in it. Soil doesn't just record death here, it transforms it, reshaping remains into nutrients for what comes next. The mainstream historical fact jumps out immediately. The ancient Chinese and Japanese were masters of composting long before modern science. They carefully recycled human and animal waste back into the fields, maintaining soil fertility for centuries. While other empires collapsed under exhausted land, East Asia's farmlands kept producing, thanks to the memory loops of compost. Soil there wasn't drained, it was replenished, told again and again, "You are alive." The quirky tidbit. In Victorian London, there was a fad for moss gardens made from the compost of tea leaves. People literally hoarded their used tea, layering it in jars to grow miniature green displays on windowsills. A kind of genteel rot, perfumed with Earl Grey. It's proof that humans have long been fascinated by the strange magic of decay. Historians still argue whether composting traditions arose from necessity or philosophy. Did people recycle organic matter because they had to, squeezed by population and land limits? Or was it a spiritual understanding of cycles, a belief that decay itself was sacred? Soil doesn't weigh in, it just keeps converting, the ultimate recycler that never tires of the job. You let the compost slide through your fingers, noticing how soft it feels, almost cushiony. Beneath the surface, billions of microbes and fungi are hard at work. You imagine them as frantic chefs in a crowded kitchen, chopping and mixing, simmering leftovers into gourmet meals for roots. They're so efficient that a pile of leaves and scraps can heat itself up, sometimes steaming in cool morning air. Compost literally burns with memory as it cooks death into life. Your thoughts drift to medieval Europe, where farmers made muck heaps of manure and straw, turning them religiously. It wasn't glamorous, but it was survival. The soil remembers those heaps too, enriched in patches where villagers worked year after year. Dig there today, and you might still find traces of centuries-old manure, the quiet legacy of farmers who didn't waste a thing. There's something both humorous and humbling in the idea that history is written not just in stone monuments, but in heaps of rotting cabbage leaves. Soil certainly doesn't discriminate. It treasures emperors' bones and potato peels equally. To the earth, compost is compost, and memory is memory. You smile at the thought and recall the Amazonian terra preta again. The dark earth, made deliberately by adding charcoal, food scraps, and bones. Even now, centuries later, those soils remain richer than surrounding land. It's like humans and soil co-authored a journal entry, one that continues to nurture crops long after the original authors vanished. You press your nose closer to the composty soil, inhaling deeply. The scent is sharp but oddly comforting, the perfume of life cycling back into itself. Gardeners call it black gold, and you can see why. The ground here is practically bursting with generosity. Every leaf that falls, every scrap that rots, is remembered not as waste but as nourishment. You picture soil winking at you as if to say, "Don't worry about your leftovers. I've got plans." And you chuckle because really, what other storyteller insists on editing tragedies into comedies? In soil's diary, endings are just beginnings rewritten with earthworms and bacteria. Historians sometimes describe compost as cultural memory of the field, the way generations of farmers shape soil through what they return to it. In that sense, every garden pile is a collaboration across centuries. A villager tossing kitchen scraps in 1200 CE might be unknowingly feeding the fertility of a modern wheat field. Soil remembers generosity too. You let a small clump fall from your hand, watch it crumble apart and feel a sense of peace. Unlike the brittle, salty crust of drought, this soil feels forgiving, patient, alive with quiet promise. It doesn't erase the fact of death, but it insists on recycling it into tomorrow. As the evening breeze stirs, you lie back again and imagine the soil beneath you as a vast compost heap, humming with memory. Bones, leaves, feathers, seeds, all broken down, remixed, and passed forward. In that sense, soil is the planet's best storyteller, not because it clings to every detail, but because it knows how to turn endings into nourishment for the next chapter. The rich scent of compost still lingers in your nose as you roll onto your side, facing a low dip in the land where grass grows thicker. You trace the contour with your eyes and realize you're looking at the ghost of a riverbed, long dry but still etched into the soil's skin. Water may have abandoned this place centuries ago, yet the ground remembers every meander, every flood, every slow retreat. You walk toward the dip, crouching where the grass thins and the soil looks lighter, sandier. Scoop some up and it slips through your fingers like sugar. That's the memory of water, sediment carried, deposited, then left behind. Soil is not just a container of seeds and bones. It's also a map, charting where rivers once carved paths, where lakes swelled and shrank, where floods stamped their mark before fading away. Mainstream history recalls how entire civilizations depended on these watery soils. Ancient Egypt, for instance, thrived because the Nile flooded predictably, leaving behind layers of fertile silt. Without that silty soil, no pyramids, no papyrus scrolls, no civilization stretching along the river's edge. The Nile wasn't just water, it was a pen writing annually into the soil's diary. The quirky tidbit: satellite images have revealed buried river systems under the Sahara Desert, invisible on the surface but still etched in the soil beneath the sand. These ghost rivers, dry for thousands of years, once flowed strong enough to support hippos, crocodiles, and human settlements. Imagine the desert you picture as barren actually humming with green corridors, long forgotten but patiently filed away underground. Historians still argue whether shifts in these vanished rivers pushed ancient peoples to migrate or whether human activity accelerated the desertification. Did climate alone erase the water, or did early land use tip the balance? Soil doesn't pick sides. It just keeps the sediment layers telling us, there was water here, once. You trace the faint channel with your steps, and the ground underfoot feels different, softer in some places, compacted in others. Plants growing here are a little taller, their roots tapping into hidden moisture trapped below. It's subtle, but the soil is still feeding off a memory of flow, a reminder that rivers linger even after their surfaces disappear. Bend down again, and you find tiny pebbles rounded smooth, their edges worn away. No rainstorm in recent years could have rolled them into such shape. These stones are evidence of water long gone, polished in the company of currents that no longer run. You hold one in your palm, imagining it tumbling along in a stream that may have quenched the thirst of mastodons or hunters trailing them. Soil tucked it here as proof, a keepsake from vanished waves. The thought makes you grin. Soil is like that friend who never deletes old texts. Rivers may ghost you, but soil screenshots the chat history forever. You picture scientists coring deep into floodplains, pulling up tubes of layered sediment. Each stripe is a pulse of water remembered, thick deposits for strong floods, thinner ones for lean years. By analyzing those stripes, researchers can reconstruct the rhythm of rivers across centuries. Soil keeps tempo like a drummer, each beat another flood, another drought, another surge of life. In medieval Europe, villages often sprouted along river valleys, taking advantage of fertile alluvial soils. But those same soils also recorded tragedies. Layers of silt sometimes bury entire settlements after catastrophic floods, preserving outlines of houses, tools, even human remains. Soil is impartial. It remembers abundance and disaster with equal devotion. The air cools as you walk farther along the old channel, and you imagine it filling with water again. Hear the rush, see the shimmer, feel the soil swallowing sediment in its quiet ledger. It's not hard to picture because the ground never really forgets. Even dry, it hums faintly with echoes of current. You crouch once more and press your palm flat against the soil. It's cooler here, holding moisture hidden from the surface heat. That faint dampness feels like memory itself, subtle, persistent, quietly nourishing. It's comforting to think that even when rivers leave, they don't vanish entirely. Soil carries them like pressed flowers in a book, delicate yet enduring. And as you straighten up, brushing the sandy grains from your hand, you realize that walking across any landscape means stepping over the ghosts of rivers. Every meadow, every desert, every city was once carved by water. The soil remembers them all, even when your eyes can't see a drop. You leave the ghost riverbed behind, but the idea of hidden currents lingers as you sink your hands once more into the soil. This time, the ground feels different, cooler, slicker in places, and faintly metallic in smell. You realize you're touching earth rich in minerals, the kind that people once prized not for farming but for healing. Soil has always been a kind of ancient pharmacy, tucking away remedies alongside its memories. You rub the damp grains between your fingers, and the faint shimmer of mica catches the last light. For thousands of years, people turned to soils like this, scooping up clay, chalk, or mineral-rich muds to soothe wounds or ease stomach aches. The mainstream historical fact: ancient Egyptians famously used Nile mud mixed with herbs as poultices. Their medical papyri list dozens of recipes that included earth, proof that soil wasn't just foundation, it was medicine. The quirky tidbit that makes you pause: in some cultures, people still practice geophagy, the intentional eating of clay. Pregnant women in parts of Africa and the American South have long nibbled at earthy clods, claiming they ease nausea or provide minerals. Modern science backs parts of this up. Certain clays can bind toxins, even heavy metals, making them safer to pass through the body. Soil as snack isn't exactly on the food pyramid, but it's definitely in the medical record. Historians still argue whether these practices emerged from instinctive knowledge, our bodies craving minerals, or from cultural traditions passed down without explanation. Were ancient healers experimenting like proto-scientists, or were they guided by beliefs in the sacredness of Earth itself? The debate swirls, and the soil remains silent, but its mineral cabinet is undeniable. You scoop up a bit of clay-rich soil and imagine smearing it across your skin. People have done this for millennia: mud baths in Roman spas, volcanic ash masks in modern wellness retreats. Soil doesn't just remember, it comforts, exfoliates, detoxifies. Somewhere between science and ritual, people have always felt better with a bit of earth pressed close. You chuckle, thinking of the odd overlap between ancient remedies and modern luxury spas. Pay a fortune to sit in a thermal mud bath today, and you're basically reenacting a Bronze Age skincare routine. Soil must find it hilarious that people now book hotel packages for what farmers once got for free while trudging barefoot through fields. Digging deeper, you uncover roots veined with mycorrhizal fungi, the hidden network connecting plants. These fungi trade minerals for sugars, delivering phosphorus, nitrogen, even protective compounds. It's soil's underground pharmacy in action, a quiet barter system that keeps entire forests alive. Without it, ecosystems collapse. You run your fingers over the white fungal threads and imagine them as glowing veins, pulsing with remedies no lab has yet cataloged. Your mind drifts to medieval Europe again, where terra sigillata, special sealed clays, were traded as miracle powders. Stamped with official marks, they were believed to cure poison and plague. Historians debate how effective they really were, but the trade itself shows the deep faith people placed in soil's healing memory. Even today, modern antibiotics trace their origins to soil. Streptomycin, tetracycline, many life-saving drugs were discovered in humble soil microbes. Beneath your hand right now could be an undiscovered chemical, a cure waiting patiently in a bacterium's DNA. Soil doesn't brag, but it's literally saved countless lives, its microbial memory turned into medicine cabinets. You smile at the irony. The same ground that stains your shoes also cradles the cures for diseases. Soil doesn't care about your laundry. It's too busy keeping humanity alive. You press your palm deeper into the cool patch of clay, feeling it stick lightly to your skin. The sensation is grounding, almost comforting, as if the soil itself wants to reassure you. It's not just recording disasters and droughts, it's also remembering how to heal. In its quiet way, soil is the oldest pharmacist, storing remedies, offering them when you're humble enough to listen. The evening air grows cooler and you sit back, clay streaked across your hand like a painted line. It feels symbolic somehow, a reminder that the earth beneath you is not only archive and grave but also apothecary. Its memory is medicinal, written in minerals and microbes. And whether or not humans fully understand it, the soil keeps whispering, "I can help." You let the clay dry on your hand, its coolness fading as it stiffens, cracking faintly like a miniature desert across your skin. When you brush it away, you notice tiny glittering particles sticking stubbornly to your palm. They look like dust, but they're magnetic dust, the kind that remembers storms not of weather but of Earth itself. Soil doesn't just archive seeds and bones, it even records the restless dance of the planet's magnetic field. You scoop up another handful and hold it close, letting grains slip slowly between your fingers. Some of these particles, tiny bits of iron, align themselves like microscopic compass needles. When they settle into soil or sediment, they freeze in place, pointing toward the direction of Earth's magnetic field at that moment in history, which means every scoop of soil is a postcard from the planet's shifting core. The mainstream historical fact: ancient sailors in China used lodestones, naturally magnetized bits of iron-rich soil and rock, as the earliest compasses. Without soil-borne magnetism, navigation might have taken centuries longer to master. These tiny minerals weren't just recording the magnetic field, they were actively guiding human history across oceans. The quirky tidbit that makes you grin: some researchers believe migrating birds and even cows line themselves up with Earth's magnetic field, responding to cues written in soil and air. There are even photographs of herds facing the same way, like polite commuters waiting for a bus. Soil, in a sense, hums a background signal that animals seem to hear better than we do. Historians still argue whether ancient builders, like those who raised Stonehenge or the pyramids, intentionally aligned their monuments to magnetic north, or whether it was coincidence wrapped in later myth. Did they sense the pull of the earth through stone and soil? Or is that just modern people projecting cosmic meaning onto old rocks? The soil's iron grains, locked in their tiny positions, don't settle the debate, but they do prove the field was different then than it is today. You imagine holding a magnet over the soil in your hand, those invisible forces tugging gently at the grains. Somewhere in these tiny alignments is a record of pole reversals, times when north and south swapped places. Soil has kept the receipts for those flips, embedding them in volcanic ash layers and lake sediments. It's one of the strangest ways the Earth remembers. Not just what grew here or died here, but how its own invisible field wobbled through time. You picture scientists crouched over sediment cores, measuring the orientation of iron particles to map ancient pole shifts. The ground beneath your feet, it turns out, doubles as a cosmic compass archive. Soil doesn't just whisper local stories of seeds and floods. It hums with planetary memory, keeping time with Earth's inner heartbeat. The wind rustles the grass and you think of storms, geomagnetic ones sparked by the sun. Soil feels those too. When solar winds buffet the planet, they leave traces in the magnetic record, faint but detectable. It's as if the Earth's dirt diary occasionally includes entries like, "Dear future reader, the sun was extra grumpy today." You chuckle softly at the thought. Soil as the ultimate storm chaser, except instead of chasing tornadoes, it calmly logs solar tantrums for millions of years. Looking at your palm, still dusted with glittering specks, you realize that touching soil is also touching a frozen compass needle from long ago. These particles pointed north when mammoths still roamed, when glaciers advanced, when your distant ancestors chipped tools from stone. And here they are, still holding their place, tiny iron scribes that never lost their page. The idea is dizzying. That dirt beneath your feet contains not just human memory, not just ecological memory, but planetary memory. Soil doesn't merely remember what happened above, it remembers what Earth itself was feeling deep in its molten core. As the stars begin to brighten overhead, you picture magnetic lines wrapping the planet like invisible ribbons, tugging faintly at everything, from iron in the soil to the compass app on your phone. And the soil beneath you, humble and silent, has been recording those shifts for eons. It's like lying on a giant magnetic tape recorder, one that doesn't care whether you ever hit play. You dust your hands clean, watching the last glitter fade in the dim light. Soil may be silent, but it hums with cosmic memory, storing not just the stories of people and plants, but the restless moods of the planet itself. You dust off the last specks of magnetic glitter and sit upright, stretching your legs into the grass. Beneath you, the soil feels uneven, hard ridges, subtle dips, places where the earth seems shaped by hands. You realize you're sitting on old furrows, the faint grooves left by farming. Soil doesn't just keep the grand cosmic memories, it remembers sweat, toil, and the stubborn rhythm of human labor. You run your hand along a shallow depression, imagining how many times a plow must have cut this line. Year after year, oxen or horses dragged wooden blades through this ground, guided by hands long gone. Mainstream history tells you agriculture first took root some 12,000 years ago in the Fertile Crescent, and everywhere it spread, soil bore the imprint of furrows, terraces, and irrigation ditches. Civilization itself is written in these grooves. The quirky tidbit. In the Andes, archaeologists uncovered raised fields and terraces so old that local legends said they were built by giants. Soil kept their memory alive even after the cultures that made them vanished. Centuries later, farmers experimented by replanting those forgotten terraces and found they still worked, draining floods and conserving moisture. It's as if soil had been waiting all along, holding onto the blueprint. Historians still argue whether early farmers understood the long-term consequences of their soil work. Did they notice erosion creeping in, or were they too focused on the next harvest to care? Some civilizations thrived for millennia with careful practices. Others collapsed when the soil, exhausted and scarred, could no longer yield. The debate remains, but the furrows endure, a patient testimony underfoot. You lie back, imagining the sounds of ancient fields, the scrape of plow blades, the grunts of animals, the low hum of farmers singing to keep pace. The soil absorbed it all, swallowing their footsteps, their sweat, even the broken tips of tools lost mid-season. To modern eyes, it's just dirt. To the ground itself, it's a memory quilt of labor. A breeze stirs and you glance at a nearby hill. Its slope looks odd, too flat, too even. Terraces. The patient staircases of soil, carved to catch rain and slow erosion. You picture rows of grain shimmering on those steps, each terrace a ledger line where the earth recorded human effort against gravity. Soil never erases those marks. Centuries later, archaeologists can still trace the patterns in the contours of hillsides. And then you laugh softly, thinking how soil might view human farming as doodles scribbled across its surface. Furrows, terraces, ditches. It's graffiti, but in 3 dimensions. Still, graffiti or not, the earth keeps it, filing away our stubbornness and ingenuity side by side. In medieval Europe, ridge and furrow farming left wave-like patterns still visible today. You can fly over the English countryside and see them, soil's quiet reminder of centuries of plowing. Beneath those ridges lie fragments of pottery, bones, and seeds, each a note in the ongoing ballad of rural life. Soil remembers not just the farming itself, but the people who lived, feasted, and faltered nearby. You press your palm into one of the old grooves and feel its coolness. Soil doesn't forget hands, even ungloved, blistered ones. Every season of plowing and planting left behind microscopic layers of wear, compacted earth, redistributed nutrients, traces of old roots. You might not see them with your eyes, but they're archived beneath the surface. It strikes you suddenly how farming is really a dialogue with memory. Farmers write into soil with furrows, and soil answers with fertility or fatigue. Sometimes it rewards patience, sometimes it punishes greed. Either way, the ground always keeps the receipts. You picture a farmer from centuries ago pausing at this very spot, leaning on a wooden hoe, sweat dripping into the earth. Did they wonder if their work would last? Did they sense that soil was recording them, even without monuments or books? Maybe not. But the grooves you're touching now are their silent testimony, still legible if you know how to read. As night deepens, you lie back again, letting your spine settle against the uneven ridges. They cradle you gently, a strange echo of ancient effort cushioning your rest. The soil beneath you is alive with memory. Not cosmic storms tonight, not ancient seeds, but human hands and hooves, the stubborn artistry of farming etched forever into the ground. The furrows cradle your back as you lie still, and for a while you simply listen to the quiet. Then you notice how the soil beneath the ridges feels oddly compacted, almost harder than the earth around it. You roll to your side, brush away a clump of grass, and your fingers tap against something unyielding, flat, smooth, too regular to be stone. Concrete, maybe brick. You dig a little more and reveal the edge of a buried pavement. Soil doesn't just remember farmers, it swallows cities. Every abandoned street, every collapsed wall, every toppled column eventually crumbles and becomes part of the ground. Roots weave through mortar. Earthworms drag pebbles deeper. Pavements dissolve into dust until the line between civilization and dirt vanishes. Yet soil, with its infinite patience, keeps the outlines like pressed flowers. The mainstream historical fact is a familiar one. Troy, the legendary city of Homer's epics, was long thought a myth until archaeologists uncovered its ruins beneath layers of soil in the 19th century. Each stratum revealed a different version of the city, rebuilt again and again before being swallowed. The soil itself had kept the story waiting, quiet proof that legends leave footprints. The quirky tidbit. In Central America, entire Mayan cities were hidden under jungle for centuries until LIDAR, laser mapping, peeled back the canopy. The soil had cradled them all along, slowly folding temples and plazas into its green embrace. Some locals joked that the earth was simply tucking the cities in for a long nap. Historians still argue how much of these collapses were sudden versus gradual. Did war and drought drive people away quickly, leaving soil to rush in like a tide? Or did abandonment stretch over centuries, with the ground creeping in so slowly that no one noticed until the walls were gone? Either way, the soil always wins, not maliciously, just inevitably. You rest your palm against the fragment of pavement, its surface gritty, cold. Imagine a Roman sandal clattering here, or a market vendor sweeping dust from this spot centuries ago. Soil swallowed their steps, their goods, their laughter, layering over them until silence ruled. Now grass grows, roots pry, worms wriggle. The ground reclaims everything. The thought makes you smirk. Soil is the planet's most patient landlord. You can build roads, skyscrapers, palaces, but stop paying rent in the form of upkeep, and the earth repossesses the property. Slowly, politely, but without exception. You picture the ruins of Pompeii again, entombed by volcanic soil that both destroyed and preserved. Streets, mosaics, bakeries, they remain legible because the soil decided not to scatter them. Or think of Angkor in Cambodia, where tree roots strangle stone temples, their trunks thicker than walls. Soil is always both eraser and archivist, deciding what fades and what endures. A breeze stirs and you wonder what lies beneath your very feet, bits of roof tiles, coins, bones, fragments of glass. Soil doesn't differentiate between treasures and trash. It accepts everything, mixes it, and slowly erases the line between artifact and mineral. A buried city eventually becomes geology. And yet, when people dig, the memories are still there. Archaeologists unearth roads with wheel ruts still visible, proof of traffic from 1,000 years ago. Soil had been sitting on them patiently, like a grandmother keeping a box of photographs under her bed, waiting for someone to ask. You grin at the absurdity. Soil is the original urban planner and demolition crew rolled into one. Build a city, abandon it, and the ground will handle the transition paperwork. Eventually, where there were boulevards, there will be meadows. Where there were towers, there will be trees. Soil loves a good renovation, especially if it takes a millennium. You lie back against the uneven patch of ground again, imagining the city that might have been here. Vendors calling, children playing, carts rattling. The soil beneath you was once foundation stone, then debris, now just memory. And someday, perhaps, someone else will dig here and find the faint imprint of your footprints pressed into the earth. The thought is both unsettling and oddly comforting. Soil is impartial. It swallows emperors and street sweepers alike, then lets their stories mingle underground until all are part of the same memory. Cities crumble, roots pry, the green tide rises, but soil never forgets. The buried pavement lingers in your thoughts as you wander toward a patch of soggy ground at the edge of the field. Your shoes squish, and the soil darkens, heavy with moisture. The smell changes too, rich, sharp, almost tangy, like wet tea leaves steeped too long. You realize you've stepped into peat, that dark, spongy soil that is less a garden bed and more a library of climates. Peatlands are the Earth's damp filing cabinets. Made of layer upon layer of half-decayed moss and plants, they stack slowly over centuries. Each soggy stratum locks in pollen, seeds, insects, even wooden tools, preserving them with eerie care. In their quiet patience, peat bogs are time machines. Mainstream history leans on them often. Scientists pull long cores of peat and use the trapped layers to reconstruct ancient climates. One famous example comes from Ireland, where peat cores revealed the timing of medieval Little Ice Age cooling. The bogs had written it down faithfully, layer by layer, while human scribes were still arguing over crop yields and bad harvests. The quirky tidbit: peat bogs sometimes preserve butter. Yes, actual chunks of butter, buried in wooden tubs by ancient farmers who probably wanted to keep it cool and safe. Thousands of years later, archaeologists dig up these bog butters, still recognizable, still greasy, though not exactly spreadable on toast unless you're feeling adventurous. Soil's memory doesn't discriminate between epics and groceries. Historians still argue whether the presence of ceremonial deposits in bogs, like weapons or jewelry, meant ritual sacrifice or just practical disposal. Were bogs sacred vaults or handy refrigerators with extra mystique? The soil doesn't clarify. It just holds on, patient as ever, whether it's butter or bronze. You crouch and press a fingertip into the spongy ground. It leaves an impression that fills slowly with water. This peatland feels alive, yet ancient. Every squelch under your shoe is a page turning in its soggy diary. The mosses here have been building this archive for millennia, each new layer pressing the last one deeper into shadow. Peat is strange soil, half earth, half memory foam. It resists decay, which is why it stores so much carbon, locking away centuries of plant breath. Scientists estimate peatlands hold more carbon than all the world's forests combined. That makes them not just climate historians, but climate actors, their memory shaping the air itself. You grin at the thought, soil as both archivist and activist. Not only does it keep receipts, it waves them around in the atmosphere whenever humans meddle too much. Drain the bogs, and they exhale their stored carbon like a sigh of exasperation. The eerie side is hard to ignore too. Peat bogs have preserved entire human bodies so well that their skin, hair, even stomach contents remain. The Toland man of Denmark still wears the noose that killed him, his features so intact you almost expect him to open his eyes. Soil in a bog doesn't just remember, it embalms. And though you're not here to solve mysteries, you can't help but shiver slightly at the thought. Still, there's beauty in this memory. Bogs preserve forests too, ancient stumps rooted deep in the muck, silent witnesses to landscapes long gone. Some are so well kept that researchers can sand and polish the wood, revealing tree rings that describe summers and winters from thousands of years ago. Its dendrochronology meets soil's soggy scrapbook. You step carefully, each footfall sinking softly. Imagine peat as a librarian with damp fingers, gently pressing one page after another, never tearing, never rushing. Every pollen grain, every beetle wing, every butter tub is cataloged. The fact that we can still read these stories today feels miraculous and a little humbling. The air grows cooler, mist rising faintly off the bog. You take a long breath of its earthy tang and realize that soil here isn't just preserving the past, it's warning the future. Each layer whispers of warming and cooling, of forests rising and falling. And if humans listen, we might avoid repeating the mistakes etched into its damp archive. For now, though, you step back to firmer ground, peat clinging to your soles. The bog behind you hums with quiet memory, still recording, still patient, still holding centuries close in its watery arms. You scrape the damp peat from your shoes and wander toward higher, firmer ground. The air feels different here, less mossy, sharper somehow. Your foot catches on something metallic half buried in the dirt. You bend down and brush away the soil until your fingers graze the edge of rust. It's jagged, twisted, unmistakably shaped by human hands, but long since claimed by the earth. Soil doesn't just remember forests and floods, it remembers wars. You tug gently and a shard of corroded metal comes free, maybe shrapnel, maybe part of a tool. The soil around it is darker, heavier, as though it absorbed more than minerals. Wars don't just scar landscapes above ground, they seep into the dirt. Bullets, helmets, buttons, bones, all slowly folded into the archive. Soil is a reluctant soldier, quietly filing every skirmish. The mainstream historical fact here is sobering. Much of Europe's farmland is still littered with what they call the iron harvest. Each spring, farmers plow up old artillery shells from World War I and World War II. A century later, the soil keeps coughing up reminders of trench lines and battlefields. Some shells are harmless with age, others still dangerous. The ground simply refuses to let war be forgotten. The quirky tidbit: archaeologists at a Civil War battlefield in the US once unearthed a soldier's lead bullet that had fused with another bullet midair. Two projectiles collided, melted slightly from impact, then dropped into the soil where they waited more than 100 years to be found. It's the kind of freak accident you'd expect in a video game, yet the soil kept it as proof. Historians still argue whether landscapes recover from war naturally or whether the scars are permanent. Does the soil heal itself, cycling shrapnel and blood into minerals, or does it remain haunted, fertility forever altered? Some fields bloom again with crops, others stay barren for decades. The ground may hold the answer, but it refuses to generalize. Each patch tells a different story. You let the shard of rusted metal drop back to the earth. It lands with a soft thud, swallowed again, as if the soil isn't finished with it yet. The ground beneath you feels heavier, like it carries the weight of sorrow. You imagine trenches dug into this soil, men crouched low, boots pressing into mud, the earth soaking up their fear along with their blood. And yet even here, life pushes back. Wildflowers often colonize battlefields, their roots weaving through bones and shells. Soil doesn't discriminate, it simply remembers. A daisy growing above shrapnel is still nourished by the same ground. You can almost hear the soil sigh. Yes, I hold pain, but I also hold renewal. You think of Hiroshima, where atomic shadows were burned into concrete, but soil beneath carried the radioactive memory for decades. Or Verdun, where shells reshaped the land into cratered moonscapes that remain visible today. Walk those grounds, and the soil crunches underfoot with more than pebbles. It crunches with fragments of history that never decomposed. A strange mix of reverence and humor rises in you. Imagine soil as the most stubborn war correspondent. It takes notes on every explosion, every trench, every skirmish, and never files its report late. Unlike human journalists, it doesn't pick sides, it just records. Even the mud spattered on boots becomes sediment eventually, proof that someone marched here. You kneel, scoop a handful, and wonder how much of this dirt is mixed with iron filings, gunpowder residue, even microscopic traces of bone. Soil, in its way, is the ultimate democrat. It doesn't sort soldiers from civilians, winners from losers. It holds all equally, folding them back into the same memory bank. As twilight deepens, you imagine the silence after battles, smoke clearing, cries fatting. The soil underneath was already busy, beginning its work of preservation. It cradled the spent cartridges, the broken bayonets, the unmarked graves. While humans moved on, the ground kept it all, too polite or too burdened to ever discard. You press your palm flat against the earth again, feeling its coolness. Beneath you lies a war archive without shelves, every grain of soil a reluctant page. And though the stories are heavy, the ground still whispers them, even beneath the roots of flowers blooming defiantly above. The shard of rust still weighs on your mind as you move farther across the field, the air cooler now, the sky deepening into indigo. You pause, crouch low, and scoop another handful of soil. This time it feels ordinary at first, gritty, brown, unremarkable. But you know better. Some soils hum with memories too recent, too eerie, the fingerprints of radioactivity. You let the soil sift slowly through your fingers, and you picture invisible isotopes clinging to the grains. After World War II, nuclear tests dusted the atmosphere with fallout that circled the globe. Those particles settled into soils on every continent, creating a strange, modern time stamp. The mainstream historical fact: scientists now use the layer of cesium-137 left by mid-20th century nuclear detonations as a marker horizon. Dig into sediments or soils, and when you hit that radioactive line, you know you've reached the 1950s. Soil, in its quiet way, carries a glowing bookmark. The quirky tidbit: in 2010, scientists found traces of plutonium from Cold War bomb tests even in Antarctic ice and in deep ocean sediments. The fallout dust traveled farther than anyone expected, landing in soils so remote no human had ever touched them. It's as if the planet sneezed and left tissues scattered in every corner. Soil, being tidy, tucked them into its archives anyway. Historians still argue whether this radioactive signature should be used as the official start of the Anthropocene, the proposed geological epoch of human impact. Is the fallout line our calling card as a species, the moment soil itself can say, "Here," where humans got loud enough to leave a global stain? Some argue for plastics, others for carbon spikes. Soil doesn't weigh in, it simply keeps glowing quietly, a witness whether or not we choose to call it history. You press your palm against the ground and think about how unsettling it is that soil remembers in ways we can't undo. Seeds might lie dormant, pollen might vanish, but radioactive isotopes decay at their own glacial pace, half-lives ticking like patient metronomes. Soil holds onto them long after we've forgotten the tests, the mushroom clouds, the headlines. And yet, not all of this memory is purely grim. Fallout layers, strange as they are, help archaeologists and geologists pin down the age of modern sediments with uncanny precision. Soil essentially gave itself a timestamp, one we can now use to calibrate other timelines. It's as if the Earth begrudgingly said, "Fine, I'll use your nuclear tantrums as a bookmark." You laugh softly at the irony. Humanity spends billions trying to preserve archives on paper, microfilm, and cloud servers, while soil casually locks in our radioactive fingerprints without even asking. It's the ultimate backup system, whether we like it or not. You think of Hiroshima again, where soil still carries faint signatures of cesium and other isotopes decades after the blast. Or the Chernobyl exclusion zone, where soil holds so much radioactive memory that mushrooms growing there are still too dangerous to eat. The ground is patient, but its patience is long, centuries, millennia. Soil doesn't forget quickly. And yet, life adapts. In Chernobyl's soils, fungi have been found that not only tolerate radiation but may even use it for energy. The Earth, it seems, keeps writing new entries even in the harshest chapters. Soil's memory is not only about scars, it's also about resilience. You brush the dirt from your hands, half expecting to see them glow faintly in the dusk. They don't, of course, but the thought lingers. Somewhere beneath your feet, isotopes are ticking quietly, half-lives unfolding while the rest of the world hurries on. Soil doesn't rush. It remembers at the speed of decay. The stars above begin to scatter brighter across the sky, and you can't help but connect them to the isotopes below. Both are made of cosmic events, explosions, fusion, the restless dance of matter. Above and below, the universe leaves its fingerprints. Soil is simply the surface where they're collected. You take one more breath, feeling the cool night air in your lungs. Then you press your hand firmly into the ground as if to acknowledge the strange partnership. Humanity left its radioactive memory here. Soil, patient and impartial, agreed to hold it. You sit still for a long moment, hand pressed to the soil, imagining those invisible isotopes pulsing like quiet ticks of a cosmic clock. When you finally move, the air feels heavier, as though the ground itself is reminding you of another kind of archive it holds, one older, quieter, but no less powerful. Carbon. Soil isn't just a vault of artifacts and scars. It's the planet's black ledger, recording the balance between sky and earth. You scoop up a dark clump and crumble it slowly. The rich color comes from organic carbon, fragments of leaves, roots, microbes, and creatures too small to see, broken down and stored grain by grain. Soil holds more carbon than the atmosphere and all the world's plants combined. Every step you take presses down on a library of stored breath, exhalations from forests and fields that the ground has been collecting for millennia. The mainstream historical fact. After the Black Death swept Europe in the 14th century, farmland was abandoned for decades. Forests regrew, and soils quietly absorbed enough carbon to cause a detectable dip in global CO2. Human tragedy became soil's feast, and its memory of that regrowth still shows in the chemical record. The quirky tidbit: some of the darkest, most carbon-rich soils, Chernozems in Eastern Europe and prairies in North America, are so fertile they've been called black gold. Farmers joke that they could lose a boot in the stuff and still grow a bumper crop. Soil there is practically bursting with stored sunlight, each particle humming with the memory of ancient grasslands. Historians still argue whether humanity can, or should, engineer soils deliberately to store more carbon as a solution to climate change. Is it hubris to rewrite the soil's diary with biochar and compost, or simply wisdom to restore what was lost? The debate rages in conferences and papers, while the ground itself continues to keep its quiet, stubborn balance. You roll the dark clump between your fingers, and it smudges your skin black. Somewhere in that smear is the carbon from a tree that fell centuries ago, maybe even from plants that fed mammoths. The soil tucked it away molecule by molecule, refusing to let it vanish. Every smear of black earth is a history of breath condensed into matter. You think of the Amazon again, where terra preta, those human-made dark soils, still thrive. Ancient people added charcoal and organic matter, creating carbon vaults so stable they endure centuries later. Modern scientists call this biochar technology, but soil chuckles. It's an old trick, a reminder that humans once knew how to collaborate with the ground rather than strip it bare. You smile at the thought. Soil as banker, humanity as reckless spender. The ground saves patiently while people burn through carbon like there's no tomorrow. And when the sky fills with too much, scientists turn back to soil, begging it to hold more again. It's the planet's savings account, always asked to bail us out. You press the dark clump flat in your palm, imagining each carbon atom as a receipt, proof of what once breathed, photosynthesized, or decomposed. Soil keeps them organized in its own way, bound to minerals, tucked into humus, woven into fungal threads. It's not a perfect system. Disturb the ground too much and carbon slips free, rushing back into the sky. But when left alone, soil holds fast, a black vault beneath your feet. Your mind drifts to prairie fires, where grasslands burned but regrew, their roots plunging deep, feeding carbon into the ground. Those deep-rooted systems built rich soils that now feed millions. Soil remembered the rhythm of burning and rebirth, and in that memory, it grew generous. And you can't resist a quiet laugh. Soil as a carbon accountant, constantly balancing the books. Some deposits, some withdrawals, occasional audits when humans plow too deep or burn too much. The balance sheet is written not in numbers but in dark, fertile earth. The night air grows cooler and you feel the weight of the sky above, heavy with carbon humans have released. Beneath you, the ground seems to murmur, "I've stored what I could. The rest is up to you." You brush your blackened palm against the grass, leaving a dark streak behind. A reminder that you too are written into this ledger. Every breath you exhale, every meal you eat, every footprint presses a little more into soil's memory. You can't escape the account. You're part of the balance. The stars shine brighter now, scattered across the dark, and you feel the symmetry. Above, the sky holds carbon as invisible gas. Below, the soil holds carbon as tangible matter. Between them, you breathe, a bridge between two ledgers. Soil keeps the memory of both, its black vault deep below, its quiet patience above. You wipe the last streak of black earth from your palm, and as you sit back, a thought flickers. We no longer rely only on eyes and hands to read soil's memory. Today, people send machines beneath the surface, sensors humming like stethoscopes pressed to the planet's chest. Soil used to keep its diary locked in shadows. Now, digital tools pry the pages open. You imagine holding a sleek device over the ground and it beams signals downward. Radar waves, electric currents, lasers, translating dirt into data. Suddenly, the soil speaks in graphs and glowing maps. Ghost rivers, buried walls, forgotten furrows, all sketched out on a tablet screen. It feels like eavesdropping on the ground's private thoughts. The mainstream historical fact. Ground-penetrating radar first rose to prominence in the 1970s, used by scientists to study glaciers and permafrost. Before long, archaeologists realized it worked just as well for uncovering ruins without digging. Soil could be read non-invasively, like X-rays for the Earth. The quirky tidbit. Farmers now outfit tractors with sensors that measure soil moisture and nutrient levels in real time, adjusting fertilizer on the go. It's like soil having a direct line to the driver. Hey, buddy, I'm a little thirsty here. Ease up on the nitrogen over there. Agriculture has become a conversation, the field talking back in data streams. Historians still argue whether this flood of digital soil information is progress or intrusion. Does mapping every secret make us wiser stewards, or does it strip the mystery away? Is soil still sacred if reduced to pixels and percentages? The ground itself doesn't protest. It keeps storing memory either way. But humans debate endlessly, unsure how much of dirt's diary they truly want translated. You close your eyes and imagine scientists unrolling long soil cores in sterile labs. Machines hum, lasers scan, computers chart isotopes and pollen counts, producing dazzling graphs. Yet beneath all that technology, the story is the same, the ground quietly saying, "Here, what I've seen." Whether scribbled in black smudges or digitized into color-coded lines, the memory remains unchanged. It makes you laugh softly. Soil, the planet's oldest storyteller, now with a digital fan club. People strap satellites overhead to watch fields breathe, launch drones to scan drought-stressed patches, plug sensors into mud like hypodermic needles. The irony is almost too much. Dirt, once dismissed as lifeless, now treated like the hottest influencer, monitored from every angle. But there's awe, too. With these tools, scientists discovered hidden Viking longhouses in Iceland, Roman villas in Britain, and even entire buried cities in the Middle East, all without moving a grain of soil. It's as if the earth allowed its diary to be read through the cover, without breaking the spine. You run your fingers into the ground again, no fancy equipment, just skin and dirt. The soil doesn't feel different to you, crumbly, gritty, damp. But you know sensors could find the tiniest shifts in temperature, chemistry, even electrical resistance. Beneath your hand might be a pulse invisible to human senses, yet perfectly legible to machines. And you wonder, will the future remember us through soil samples alone? Will archaeologists of tomorrow scroll through terabytes of soil scans the way we read old books? Or will they still kneel in fields like you, palms pressed to the ground, listening with the oldest sensor of all, touch? The thought comforts you. Because no matter how advanced the tools, no satellite or drone can replace the simple intimacy of fingers in dirt. Soil may now speak in wavelengths and digital signals, but it also still whispers through smell, texture, weight. Memory remains layered, and humans, despite all their tech, still need to kneel to hear it best. As you sit back, the field around you hums with quiet possibility. Beneath the grass, sensors could trace moisture. Beneath the soil, radar could sketch roots. And beneath it all, the earth continues its patient record-keeping, unimpressed by the gadgets hovering overhead. Soil keeps its diary in silence. Humans just found new ways to listen. The digital visions fade from your mind and you lie back in the grass once more, palms pressed flat to the ground. You've traced seeds and bones, charcoal and pollen, scars of war and whispers of rivers. You've watched soil remember fire, drought, healing, even the restless pulse of Earth's magnetic heart. And now, in the quiet of night, you sense the most intimate truth of all. The soil remembers you too. You close your eyes and breathe deeply. The air smells faintly of moss and dust, cool and steady. Beneath you, the ground holds the warmth of your body, your sweat, even the soft imprint of your spine against the ridges. Already, a few skin cells, a drop of oil from your fingertips, maybe a stray hair are settling into the soil. Memory in progress. The mainstream historical fact is simple yet humbling. Every civilization eventually returns to the ground. From the pyramids of Egypt to the burial mounds of Japan, from Viking graves in Iceland to humble cemeteries tucked behind village churches, human history is written in soil. Entire genealogies are woven into the earth, each grave a chapter, each generation another layer. The quirky tidbit. In parts of Tibet, there's a burial tradition where bodies are left to the sky, but bones and fragments that fall to the ground eventually sink into the soil. Locals believe the earth itself consumes the memory, carrying the person forward in a different form. It's an unusually candid acknowledgement of what soil has always done: accept us, rewrite us, and keep us close. Historians still argue whether soil's role in remembrance is purely practical or spiritual. Is burial simply disposal, or is it recognition that the ground is the best archive of who we were? Some say it's ritual, others necessity, but either way, the soil doesn't debate. It accepts, keeps, and transforms. You rest your cheek against the cool earth, and the hum of crickets feels like background music for the realization that one day, your own body will return here. Not in a morbid way, more like a closing of the loop. You're already part of the soil's memory. Your footprints pressed into paths, your breath feeding carbon, your composted scraps nourishing gardens. When the time comes, the earth will simply file you in alongside seeds, stones, pollen, and bones. It makes you laugh softly, your life reduced to a few entries in soil's massive diary. September, they tripped here. October, they spilled coffee grounds here. November, they lay down and fell asleep beneath the stars. Not a bad record, really. The ground never forgets the small things. Above you, the stars spread wider, and you feel the symmetry. Soil holds the memory of what came before. The sky holds the light of what came long ago. You're caught in between, part archive, part future seed. The grass tickles your skin, and the soil beneath you feels steady, almost maternal. You realize the earth doesn't just remember in the abstract, it remembers through you, with you as you. Every time you kneel, dig, rest, or walk, you're writing yourself into its story. And maybe that's the most calming thought of all. You don't need to build monuments or carve names into stone. Simply by existing, you are already preserved in soil's memory. In 1,000 years, maybe someone will kneel where you sit now, touch the ground, and feel the faintest trace of your story. You breathe out slowly, your breath brushing the grass, and whisper to the soil, half amused, half reverent, "Don't forget me." The ground, of course, doesn't answer aloud, but beneath your palm you know it already has. The night is quiet now, softer than before, the air wrapped in a hush that feels almost sacred. You lie back fully, letting your body sink into the contours of the earth, as though the soil itself were a mattress shaped for you. Each ridge and hollow cushions your weight, holding you steady, as the stars above scatter like gentle sparks of memory across the sky. The stories of soil still linger, seeds waiting centuries to sprout, rivers long gone still mapped in sand, charcoal flecks recording fires that once roared. They drift through your mind now like pages of a book slowly closing, each detail fading into the background. You don't need to hold them tightly. The earth is doing that for you. It always has. Your breathing slows, and you notice how your chest rises and falls in rhythm with the quiet beneath you. The soil accepts it, takes it in, and holds it without judgment. Every sigh, every trace of warmth becomes part of its record. You are not separate from the ground. You are part of its ongoing memory. The words of history, the fragments of debate, the mysteries yet unsolved, they all soften now, dissolving into the hush of night. What remains is the steady truth. The soil is patient, eternal in its way, remembering without effort, keeping stories without needing to tell them. As your eyelids grow heavier, the soil beneath you seems to whisper reassurance that nothing is lost, not really. That every step, every breath, every small act is folded into its memory. You are safe here, held, remembered. Let yourself drift now, slowly, gently, into that vast archive of silence, where the ground keeps watch and the stars keep time.